A politician in Missouri has proposed a bill that would make it illegal for municipalities and localities to pass their own eviction moratoriums. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting topic for you today, and it's coming out of the state of Missouri. So, as I've mentioned before, I invest in Missouri, okay? I own 6 duplexes in Independence, Missouri. So, what happens there is very important to me. Not only that, but I'm from the Kansas City area. So, I keep track of what's going on in the state. And right now, there's a politician out of the Kansas City area who's proposing a bill in the state legislature that would ban local municipalities from implementing rent control, or not rent control, but eviction moratoriums, okay? So obviously, this is in response to all of the nonsense that happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I can't blame anyone for wanting to make sure that that kind of stuff never happens again, okay? They stripped landlords of their property rights. They told us that, hey, making a profit isn't important, and they expected us to become the homeless shelter and the social service provider for all of the poor and all of the helpless people throughout the entire country, and it was wrong. Okay? It violated the Constitution, and the Supreme Court ended up throwing all of that nonsense out. But there's a lot of localities and municipalities, that would say, oh, no, we needed it. And, we want, and they will implement it again next time they get a little inkling of a feeling that, hey, we want to do something. And that's wrong, okay? I want to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen again. And fortunately, there are people with, sound minds in the state of Missouri who are trying to prevent that from happening again. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think, okay? Do you think that this is going to pass, first of all? Do you think that they're going to make it so that eviction moratoriums can't be implemented again within the state of Missouri? Or do you think that's not going to pass? And second of all, I did want to mention that right now I'm out of town. I'm in Seattle, Washington for work. And, I'm not in my car for at least another day or two. And, I'm just making a video here. And, hopefully you guys are still watching it. The content is the same, just the location is different. So let's get into this article. This article is coming from the ColumbiaMissourian.com, and it says, House Committee debates eviction bill. All right, and let's get into it. State Representative Chris Brown, Republican from Kansas City, presented a bill Monday that would require counties and municipalities to receive state authorization to establish eviction moratoriums. The bill is his response to the loss of income that many landlords and investors experienced due to the COVID-19 pandemic when evictions were prevented by federal legislation. In a hearing conducted by the House Special Committee on Small Business, Brown specifically cited the CARES Act, which placed a 120-day moratorium on evictions starting in March 2020, and the CDC's moratorium order that expired in August 2021 after its extension was blocked by the U.S. Supreme Court. Brown said that during that time, some landlords could not evict tenants who could not pay their rent but met the specific requirements for protection. And there were a lot of tenants who they took advantage of the situation. That's just a very simple way to say it, okay? There were people who were getting multiple stimulus checks. They were getting enhanced unemployment benefits. They were getting their regular tax returns on top of that, okay? And they could not pay their rent, supposedly, because they were in such hardship. And we all know that was garbage. We all know that it was BS. And they were just trying to live somewhere for free. Meanwhile, they were stacking up the bucks. They were spending it on, cigarettes or alcohol or gambling or whatever other useless thing that they were spending it on instead of paying the people that they owed. And that you know what? It screwed landlords over. Instead of saying, hey, we're going to send these funds directly to landlords, they gave these tenants this huge benefit, and they got to essentially double dip, okay? They got to stay for free, and then they got all of their stimulus payments on top of that. The $46.5 billion allocated by the federal government to aid landlords was also not dispersed appropriately, Brown said. as only 5.1 billion has been distributed by the end of 2021. Brown said the moratorium set in place during the pandemic infringed on property rights and contract law. He also said these moratoriums were an arbitrary seizure of property. Well, you know what? I wouldn't doubt for one second this guy, Brown, is actually a landlord himself, okay? So, I mean, just the way that he's going about this, it sounds like he's saying, hey, listen, this doesn't make any sense. This is the reasons that, we can't have these laws implemented by local governments anymore. Okay? I don't want to see it implemented by national governments. I want to make sure that these laws are banned. I want to make sure that the Supreme Court says they are 100% unconstitutional. But this is the very first step. And, as a state level legislator, this might be all that this guy can do. But if he gets this bill passed, it will benefit me. Like I said, I own property in the state of Missouri. I would also say this, that the government being able to come in and tell me what I'm going to do with my rental property, such as this moratorium, it appropriates private property for public use, Brown said. Brown said this caused problems for landlords and investors. Without receiving rent payments from tenants, some landlords had difficulty paying mortgages, property taxes, and insurance and were unable to prioritize maintenance. I am absolutely not unsympathetic to individuals that have housing issues or are facing economic issues. That's not the purpose of this bill, Brown said. This is not some callous attempt for landlords to railroad tenants. Yeah, and that's the main point, okay? We're not trying to railroad tenants. What we are saying is that an eviction moratorium where a tenant is unable to pay rent, well, guess what? That is not constitutional. That is taking away a landlord's property rights, and you're forcing us to bear the cost of housing these people for, in terms of the eviction moratorium, more than a year. In some places, years now. Because, like places like in Los Angeles County, California, this has been going on for 3 years. But fortunately, it's over. Okay, that's the one thing I can say. The bad part is that a lot of landlords have not recovered, and even though they didn't immediately, fall into bankruptcy or whatever, their financial losses are piling up, and we might see more landlords going into bankruptcy within the next year or two, or extreme financial distress to the point where they have to sell their properties and just take huge losses. And that's wrong. Okay, the government should have compensated the people for the burden that they put on them, and they didn't. They created a ridiculous rental assistance program that had very specific criteria, and a lot of landlords were stuck with tenants who not only were protected by the eviction moratorium, but didn't qualify for rental assistance. So yeah, it was an unconstitutional taking of private property for public use without just compensation. How many times do I have to say that? Anyway, interesting article. I'm going to put a link to the article in the description. You can read the rest because, you know what? I want to see laws like this implemented throughout the entire country.